So to start removing this tank, see if we can get this positioned where it's going to stay and not move. It's going to be fairly simple. And as I say that, it's probably going to be a pain in the butt. You shouldn't need too much. Driver, extensions, and I believe pretty much all of it is a 14, 12, and 10 millimeter. You will need some hell, I don't even remember what they're called, but they're a removal tool for like fuel lines and I forget what type of connector they're called, but anyways, you slide them up inside of the fitting and this spreads out. I'll show you in some detail. Because that goes on your fuel lines and the EVAP system. But right now, what I'm going to focus on is I'm going to undo this line. Got 4 14 mil bolts for the straps. You got one there, and then of course the actual strap. There's 2 on the other side. I went ahead and already hit these with penetrant just to make it a little bit easier. And then also we're going to disconnect this line, that line, and I may have to undo these bolts to get that line off. But we'll see if I can get my disconnect tools in there. And then the filler neck, I'll probably show you when you get there, but there is kind of like a little tab. You see this little metal ring here? There's a tab, and it's kind of like a C-hook that wraps around. So you got to pull that tab, and then that whole like C-hook deal falls, and then you can pull that off. There's a little rubber ring in there that makes the seal. But that will disconnect all of the filler tube and EVAP system, because your filler tube are these 3 here, as well as this tube that comes from a canister under here, but we don't need to get to that, and that's that line that comes here. So we'll start undoing these lines and everything, and then get this tank out of here so we can try and put that other tank in here and see how everything's gonna fit. So I'm gonna try and put you in a position where you can see some of this stuff happen, and then we'll get busy. So those little disconnect tools, like I was telling you about, find the right one for the size that you need, and you basically slide them up in there, which of course this one's going to be a pain in the butt. It's too fat around there, but you got to get it down inside of that connector for it to spread the wings on it. There we go. Ish. There we go. Yeah. And then it gets it up over the notch. So I don't know if you can see this very well. Here, let's just get closer. So kind of see how that goes on there. And these two bevels press against this ring to keep this sealed. So when it's in the actual, there's not another one on here for me to show you. When it's in the on position, those little notches will be past that ring, and this tool, release tool, whatever you want to call it, presses equally on both sides. Sorry. Pushes equally on both sides to get both of them up and over that little notch. So that's kind of how that works. Now, I didn't have these when I went and pulled all this stuff from the junkyard. So you can do it with pliers and picks, but it's a bit cumbersome and you'll be cursing and it'll take a lot of time, but it can be done without the tool if you're in a pinch and you need to. So let's get you set back up. Get going again. So now that that's done, we don't need to disconnect any of that because that will all come down in one piece. Some of these you have to press pretty hard on the just like little pinch tabs, and they're kind of a pain in the butt too, but sometimes this tool can help release that. And the same principle. Oof, probably gonna have to get a pair of pliers to do that one. Because you press those two tabs and it's got a spring in there that's ovaled, and that kind of opens it up so then you can pop it off there. They make special tools for that, of course, but I'm too cheap. Let me get a different plier. One up top, same way, in a very unforgiving spot. Might need a set of straights for that, dude. Or I can pop that line and drop it. No, I'm not going to be able to drop it because of the freaking filler net. Okay. Okay, now I need to get the Okay, now we need to get the main filler neck. Those little tabs I was telling you about. Once I get this out, I will show you what I'm talking about on how this works. I think I'm gonna need a twofer. Alright, it's legit like a C-clip. So these two tabs will be on the like 12 o'clock position or like 1 o'clock, but whatever. And you'll get your pick in there and you'll pull on one side or the other. And then once it's spread a little bit, you can put a screwdriver, or like in my instance, I did a needle noser, but whatever you can get in there, and pry that down, and then it'll come the rest of the way out. And then you'll be able to pull that filler neck. Now be cautious, because there probably still is fuel inside of that filler neck. So just be mindful of that whenever you go to pull that out of the fuel tank. And I may not be able to get it now. I may have to wait until I actually drop the tank some. So I'm actually going to do that first. So 14. May need swivels. The extensions I got have a little bit of a swivel to them. So I may be able to get there. Nope. And also, I think the ones on the junkyard, I had to actually, what was it? What was it I did? Oh, yeah, I had to break them by hand first, so I'm actually going to do that. Yeah, let's get a small extension on there. And I think I'm gonna actually go get a swivel. So then that way I can put my little driver on it. Oh, quit it. Of course. Need more extension. Watch me need more than what just put on. Should wear a little tight. Get my head turned. Jeez. Whew. Let's try pushing. Okay. So I should go pull my seats and lift the little lid to disconnect the connector that goes to the fuel tank, but if I'm not mistaken, I can drop it a little bit and then reach my hand up in there and get it, so that way I don't have to go crawling in my interior. I don't feel like doing that. Okay, so do I want to put a jack under it right now? Yes. Let me get my jack. All that's got to do is just hold it. I remember where this strap bolt is. One. Should be enough. 3, yeah. 4. Okay. So now we've got our canisters and fuel line disconnected, except for the fill line, and we've got our straps loose. Now we do have one fuel line back over yonder that I need to disconnect as well, but I can't remember which line it is. Oh, I do now. See that one with that funny little lock connector on it? You basically have to push that little lock down. Here, let's zoom in just a little bit. You have to push that red lock down, and then just like I did a minute ago, you see that little blue tab? There's one on the opposing side. Grab that with a pair of pliers, twist and pull, and it should come right out. So I'll get that one disconnected, and then we will see if we can drop this tank and get that connector, and then it should come the rest of the way out. Man, trying to be a cameraman and do this at the same time is kind of a pain in the butt. Does that work? That's good enough, right? Let's go ahead and get these straps off. That way you got something else to catch up on. Okay, let's get that fuel line. Whenever you go to do this fuel line, be careful. It will be under pressure. So just expect fuel to come out of that dude. There we go. I know when I did the one at the junkyard, I ended up cutting that line and then doing it off the vehicle just because it was easier. Something like that, maybe. She ain't going nowhere. Ooh, I like the sound of that. I was able to push it with my fingers. Get my head out of the way. Come on, baby. Dirty tummy. There we go. So those other special pliers I was talking about, when I get this tank pulled, that line will come with it and I can show you. But they basically have a claw. The claw. And it pinches from both sides, whereas you know your traditional pliers squeeze equally like this. These have an actual pincher to indent it. Anyways, so that's out. Straps loose. EVAP unplugged. Filler neck is the last thing, and the electrical connector up top. You will have two connectors. You'll have the one going to the fuel pump, which is kind of doing this number, and then you'll have another one that is, I believe, facing that way, and it's a white plug for the EVAP system. So we'll lower this, finagle our hands up in there, get that out of the way, try and work this filler neck, and then it should all come out. Work that from the other side. That might be enough for me to get this filler neck. Like I said, careful because there might be fuel that comes out with it. Ideally, you want to drain the tank, but since I'm tempting a risky swap and not just putting another stock tank back in it, I didn't drain it. Okay. Filler's pretty much undone. Now, the trick is to get, oh, there's that filler neck I was talking about. Trick is to get the tank to go up in the front, tilt so this canister and everything can clear your, I don't know what they call it, H-bar or something, I don't know. But yeah, kind of get a, and then should slide out and give us access to that set of connectors I was talking about up top. Let's see if we can lift them off the front a little bit. If we do have to unhook the canister, it is just one 10 mil bolt, and that should, well, I lied, it's 3. And then that can move out of the way. I might just do that. Save myself a little bit of headache. Even though you should have done it before. Okay, I want to lift up the tank and do that. And now since I'm lifting that up and out of the way, like I said, we should be able to lower the tank. And get that connector. Okay. There we go. Just gonna boot out of the way. Get this line over there. Move this one out of the way. Be careful with those lines. And they're plastic. And if you put too much strain on them, they will break. So bend at your own risk. Kind of the same way when you get old. Okay. Now I can see those connectors up top like I was talking about. I'll show you. Let's zoom in a little bit there. Alright. You've got the one that goes to the fuel pump and temperature sensor. Right there. And then your EVAP system is that one right there. So we'll pop those dudes off, and this tank should come the rest of the way out. At this point, I lowered the tank a little bit more so I could get some more room to get my hands in there to get those connectors loose. Okay. Now that that's up in there. There we go. Ah, yeah, baby. Now get your arm in. Okay. Okay, now we're fully disconnected from the car, maybe? Look at our lines. Let's make sure. Nope, still one more to disconnect. So there's one right next to that fuel line that I was talking about earlier. No, I gotta get. Let's see. Where you at? Ooh. Okay. So that disconnected line right there, the one next to it. You gotta do that one too, because that goes to the EVAP system. And that one should be able to use our little tool for. And that one should not have fuel coming out of it, if I recall correctly. Oh goodness. Goodness gracious. There we go. Okay, now we're fully disconnected. Should be able to and out. So I'm probably just going to push that jack out of the way because the rest of it should be able to do manpower. And gravity. Okay. Get out of here, Jack. Okay. Now we should be able to slide her out. Get out of the way. There. Alrighty, now that that's out, I can show you a little bit better detail of what was all going on. Filler neck, I had to get these two nuts off those studs, and then that one 10mm bolt goes right there. That way that can be pushed out of the way. Drop that the rest of the way out. Now, doing all of that to put in this, hopefully put in this Corolla tank, so that way it becomes serviceable and better fuel capacity. This gas tank is 13.8 or something like that, and with the bladder system that is in these Priuses, you're lucky to get 7 gallons between fill-ups, depending on the weather. Sometimes as low as 5 gallons between fill-ups, and that's the whole reason I'm swapping this, or at least attempting to. I haven't seen anybody do one. I've only read about somebody trying one and then quitting. So I'm going to see if I could finish it. So what ends up happening is this bellow, or this bladder, fluctuates on its expansion due to temperature and just becomes a pain in the butt. But also, why? I get what they were trying to do with emissions and whatnot, but obviously it didn't work out too well, because this is basically the only vehicle that I know that has a bladder tank, and everybody freaking hates it. So if this swap plan works out, we may try and go to a Camry style tank, which then will take us to, I think, 18 or 19 gallons. But in order to make this hypothetically work, you have this emissions that is specific to the Prius, and is specific to this Prius, this generation of Prius, the Gen 2, with the bladder. So this EVAP goes into the top of the tank. Then you have this vapor pressure sensor, and then you have this other canister, which is like an actuator canister, that all plumbs into the clean air system. So anywhere where there is no fuel. So this basically becomes a big vacuum tank. And what it does is, whenever that canister opens up, depending on the operation, it will do a leak down test. And what it's testing is to see if it's getting any gasoline vapor inside of this empty air, which will then read a rich system, a rich O2 reading, and will say that this tank is leaking. So it's a safety precaution to make sure that this bladder isn't ruptured. Fine and dandy, but if you're trying to do a swap to a fuel tank that doesn't have a system like that, you got to get a little creative. So what I'm going to attempt to do is make a what you would call it, a vacuum box. I'm blanking on the term. A vacuum manifold. There we go. So I'm cheap and crazy, so I found one of my old propane tanks that I took the grommets that are associated with the vehicle pressure sensor or the vehicle vapor sensor and the solenoid, and affixed them to the ends of this tank, so each one will go on either side. It doesn't matter, they're the same side or same size. And then the one nipple will go to the EVAP canister that I showed you earlier. And then this sensor right here is actually a tank temperature sensor, and it usually sits right here above the fuel tank. That supposedly helps get the fuel level based on temperature and expansion rate of the bladder. Don't quote me on all of this stuff, because all I did was read, and it's kind of my interpretation. I don't know whether it's going to work or not, so we'll find out. But basically, we still have to have this charcoal canister. So don't think that it's taken place of it. It's just taking place of the empty void that is the clean air of this tank. So I've got to hook this nipple up to the EVAP canister. Then this plug will go into the pressure sensor on this one, or the vapor pressure sensor on this one. And then this canister will go in on the other end, and its connectors and associated vacuum lines are going to go here. So the thought is, we'll get this other tank, get it up in the car, see where we can mount this, and then we can figure out where our lines and wires are going to go, and if we need to extend wires and all that such. So once I get the other tank bolted and kind of situated up in there and kind of a game plan, I'll bring you all back into the picture. So I finally got myself talked into getting ready to install this. So a little bit of a rundown. It looks pretty janky right there, but stick with me for a second. I want to try and use as many as the factory hoses and all that, so the connections go easy. The piece that sticks out here connects to this and this, and also notice the plug is the same as the pump on this one. So if I take the adapter, I'll walk through my messy garage, of this, so that is the Prius plug that sits inside the tank right there. So then this goes to the pump. This goes to the temperature sensor. So, in order to keep all the same connections, we're going to put pump on pump, and then the air temp will go to my little canister that I made, if we can find a spot to put it. And then, of course, this will go to just the regular connector on the car. Once I figure out where everything's going to go, I'll loom and tape it up and make it somewhat presentable. But as for right now, we are going to do a rough test fit of this tank in this car to see where everything lines up. The other line that came from the top of the pump, this is the original line, and what I did is I cut up that little piece that held both those lines coming out the side of the tank, so then that way I can still use my factory connections and then my factory hoses. This one's going to have to be modified one way or another, so that one's to be determined. This one I don't think is going to get used, so it'll probably get capped off because everything else is done through the EVAP system, and the way it's plumbed, it won't need that, most likely. So now we're going to push this up in there. I did get the Corolla straps. They should bolt in the same location, but we'll see, and if they don't, then of course we'll use the Prius ones. So we're gonna press forward with that and see what happens. So the biggest hurdle we're going to have with this is the fact that this filler neck is in a different location than the stock Prius one. Stock Prius one comes out somewhere around here. So I took the Corolla filler neck and cut it up in a way to where I can use the 90s and some of the straights and whatnot. And then I'm just hose clamping, and then I think I'm going to tuck it kind of like this and put the stock fuel connection for the filler hose, so then that way that is the same as well. But that's for something to figure out later. We just need to get this dude mounted up in here, or at least somewhat up in there, so we can figure out what we need to do. I'm hoping that exhaust doesn't get in the way. Shouldn't. But also, again, I test fit this on a car in a junkyard, which the exhaust was cut and loose, so who knows? At this point, I'm working the tank into place and using the stock Corolla tank straps to mount it in place. I did have to manipulate the exhaust out of the way to get the tank to sit the rest of the way in there. And then I also had to mess with the filler neck to get it in position. So I need to reduce the bend on both of these straps. Still got this exhaust issue, which I could probably cut and rotate it a little bit. To let this come down to avoid hitting any of that. Or just put in a new piece of pipe. That'd be ideal, but if I had an exhaust machine, that would be great. But I don't. At this point, I was manipulating the straps so I can get them the rest of the way bolted in, and then debated my life choices. And then also debated on what to do with the exhaust. I just want to get this thing running. So I want to see if it even turns on. So tilt, hook up the power and the electrical, all the connectors for the emissions and whatnot. Kind of put that up in here. I like this big hole that this tank has, because now I know I can put my vacuum, my clean air system somewhere over there, and then the EVAP system can sit pretty much in the exact same stock location, and we'll be good. So let's mock up that, and then we can worry about doing that. It's the next day, and I'm gonna save you from having to watch me monkey around with that install, because it was a pain and it took basically all night. So got this tank from a junkyard. It had holes in it because they drill holes in their at the junkyard. So plugged those holes, sealed up, got that good to go. The wiring harness that came from the car, I de-loomed it so I could move wires where they needed to go. The only one I actually had to extend was the vapor pressure sensor, or temperature sensor. Yeah, temperature sensor. And all the others, I was able to find a spot for it to go, and it wasn't so bad. The straps, they work out pretty decent. The only one I don't like is passenger side. It doesn't sit in its track, but that's all right. It kind of wedges the tank up in there and keeps everything good. The filler neck, I was able to pull this piece out of the Prius tank that I pulled from the junkyard, and that way it would adapt to the Prius filler neck and work out well. Used 1-inch hose to go down to the filler neck portion from the Camry, which I pulled that rubber grommet from the Camry, and then this steel pipe to make my elbow. I cut a section out of the Camry filler tube to make that happen. It's very tied up in there. It does press against other items, but the only thing I'm really gonna have to worry about is probably chafing. The rest of it's a non-issue. The exhaust is probably one of the more difficult things. If a person's going to do this and they have access to and the skill to do exhaust, I would suggest rerouting, and that will make things a million times better. But what's actually kind of saving me is my clean air tank. It's pressed up against and wedged with the exhaust, and it's giving me an air gap between the tank, and then leaving this grommet undone, that one connected. It also leaves me a gap between the exhaust tunnel and the catalytic converter's exit pipe. I was getting a rattle and was able to manipulate stuff around to give me some clearance. So that's what that was done, or how that was done. I did modify this line to give me the length and the connections that I wanted. I did have to pull this line in order to give me some freedom. The EVAP system is just kind of sitting, dangling. I would like to make a bracket for it, but I was kind of getting in a time crunch and wanted to get this thing going. So it sets in fairly same location. Run this one vacuum line, had to modify it in order to get it to my clean air tank. The spare hose that came from the top of this tank that I talked about earlier, I did plug it. It won't go to anything. The clean air tank, so this solenoid system on the tank that I pulled from the Prius, it only had a 2 wires plug. This one I believe has a 6-pin plug. So I was going to use my harness, so then that way the emissions stay the same. So I really should extend these wires. They're tight, or maybe the wires that are over here, because I think there's fewer of them. That way I can move the wire bundle, but whatever. We'll figure that out later. Just be cautious, because there are 2 different styles that I'm aware of. So if you're going to do this and you're going to pull tanks from a junkyard and expect to use it, you may not be able to use the other tanks items. I did have to put sealant around the rubber grommets and my nipple for the EVAP system. I need to put hose clamps on those. Oh well, it worked. But I did have to put sealant on those to make sure that they were going to seal. I just didn't want to have to dig everything back out. And then the temperature sensor that is from inside of the Prius tank, I put a little bead of sealant around it, so then that way that would seal. Later. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there's really anything else that was crazy that I ran into. So the biggest thing is exhaust, getting your lines ran and all that good stuff. The stock connections, I was able to use the factory hoses and just put them in respective places. Let's see if we can get up in there. And get a little bit. Can't really see much anyways. But, I mean, thus far, it's worked. I did have one check engine light at the very beginning from, I believe, there not being any vacuum or pressure for the clean air system, because it was the vapor pressure sensor. Cleared that, and then after it's been running, I've had 0 issues out of it. So people that may be concerned with the exhaust, how close it is to the tank and it melting it or anything, don't worry about that. When I took it for its test drive, I did like half hour of in-town driving, stop-go traffic, got it nice and warm. I was able to get out of the car and put my hand on the exhaust. Yeah, it's a little warm, but it's not hot enough to like melt plastic or be cause any damage. So don't be too concerned, even if that is against the tank. But to be cautious, try and put you an air gap, wrap it in some heat dissipation, put a heat shield if you are that concerned with it. Or just reroute the exhaust. I'm probably going to reroute the exhaust anyways when I go to do a Camry tank, because that's what I want to try next, if this proves out well enough. So that way we can go from a 13-gallon tank to an 18-gallon tank, and we'll be, 800 miles of fuel capacity instead of, I think this is like, what, 6 now? Close to it. But that's that. Thanks for watching. Here it is a week later, and I've ran probably about 800 miles on that tank. The only issues I ran into was having a couple of emissions leaks, so those caused emission codes. But once I got those taken care of, those went away. I did also have an issue with the fuel sending unit being faulty and not showing a proper gauge reading. But once I got those issues fixed, it was a pretty good running system. The exhaust being near the gas tank caused 0 issues, so if you're going to do this, don't be concerned about that. But also prepare to spend a couple days of doing rigging and wire extensions and making sure everything fits right. That's going to be it for this video. If you liked what you see, like and subscribe.